Hey guys, tonight we slip back into a world where beauty rules don't just suggest. They command, and they bite back if you disobey. You find yourself in a dim chamber, the air heavy with beeswax candles, the smell of damp stone, and the faint metallic tang of the combs waiting on the vanity. In this space, every strand of hair matters, not because it's luscious or flowing, but because it dares to sit too low on your forehead. The women here are determined to pull, pluck, and scrape until that line retreats higher, higher, as though climbing toward heaven. And you probably won't survive this, at least not with your eyebrows intact. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand at the edge of a mirror, a polished disc of metal rather than the sleek glass you know today. In it, a woman stares back, her forehead stretched into a pale expanse of skin, made higher not by genetics but by force. Fashion in late medieval Europe demanded foreheads so vast they looked like shining domes. To reach that lofty look, you must first suffer. Small tweezers, imagine oversized splinters of bone or metal, dig at your hairline. Each tug yanks out a strand, leaving tiny red marks that burn with irritation. You rub at your temple, but the trend calls for more, always more, until the brow seems almost erased. The idea wasn't random. A high forehead was read as a sign of nobility, intelligence, and refinement. The wider the bare canvas above your eyes, the loftier your supposed mind. Historians still argue whether this came from church ideals of purity or just an aristocratic quirk that spread like wildfire among the courts. Either way, once the noble ladies of Burgundy or Florence strutted about with gleaming foreheads, the rest of society scrambled to imitate, even if it meant agony. And eyebrows, forget them. In some regions, the brow itself was declared vulgar. A strip of hair too animal, too base. So you pluck them out too, or shave them, or singe them carefully with a small candle flame. The absence of brows leaves the face oddly alien, smooth like porcelain. But that was the goal. A woman was meant to look like a painting. Calm, expressionless, untouched by worldly grit. You, staring at your new bare brow, probably look more like a startled ghost. Now here's the quirky part. To frame this vast desert of skin, women sometimes painted thin lines higher up, little arcs that suggested eyebrows floating in the wrong place. If you think modern eyebrow trends swing wildly, thick one decade, pencil thin the next, remember these pioneers of bare is beautiful. The pain wasn't just physical. Imagine walking into a feast, torchlight bouncing off polished silver plates, and your forehead isn't quite high enough. You'd feel the eyes, the whispers. Court society thrived on cruel observations, and one wrong hair left in place could mean you were judged as lowborn, stupid, or, worst of all, unfashionable. It's the medieval equivalent of showing up at a black-tie gala in your pajamas. Some women went further, applying ointments to thin the hairline faster. Recipes survive in old manuscripts, mixtures of walnut oil, vinegar, or even cat dung blended into pastes. Rub it on, wait, and watch the follicles weaken. Of course, the smell alone probably cleared the room faster than your high forehead impressed anyone. Historians still argue whether men joined in this ritual. Some portraits show gentlemen with receding hairlines not entirely natural. Was it deliberate plucking or just genetic fortune? The debate lingers, but for women, the pressure was unmistakable. Your beauty, your rank, even your marriage prospects might hinge on how much scalp you dared to reveal. One more uncomfortable fact. In some places, the practice blended with religious symbolism. A bare brow, smooth and pale, mirrored the chastity and spiritual purity that clergy praised. It was as if ripping out your hair meant ripping out temptation itself. That's a lot of holiness packed into a tweezer. And here's your first medieval beauty joke of the night. Imagine a group of noble women gathered around, tweezers in hand, chanting, "Higher, higher," like it's a workout class, only here, the sweat isn't from aerobics. It's from sheer pain. As you picture yourself in that room, the candle flickers across those blank, shining foreheads. You feel your own skin itch, phantom hair tugging even though you haven't touched it. One by one, the brows disappear, leaving faces that seem less human, more icon-like, frozen in painted dignity. And you wonder, How many times have people suffered just to look like what society demanded? The medieval answer is, always more times than makes sense. By the time you retreat from the vanity, your forehead feels bare, exposed to the draught from the stone window slit. It tingles, tender, and yet this pain is not a mark of shame. It's a badge of belonging. You've joined the silent army of plucked and polished faces who believe a browless stare equals power. Remember this feeling, because tonight, the farther we go, the more your comfort zone will vanish strand by strand, just like your eyebrows did. You wander now into a courtyard where the light itself feels like an enemy. The stone walls rise high, blocking wind but not the relentless sun. And here's the rule. If you return indoors with colour in your cheeks, people will think you've been doing something terribly low, like working. Pale skin is your passport to nobility, proof that your hands don't churn butter and your back doesn't bend over wheat. You squint at your reflection in a basin of still water, the faint flush on your face already a threat to your reputation. To fix that, you reach for powder, not a friendly pressed compact from the drugstore, but crushed chalk, ground alabaster, even lead carbonate scraped into fine dust. Dab it on with a bit of cloth or puff, and instantly your skin blanches into an otherworldly glow. The look says, I am untouchable, delicate, closer to marble statue than mortal flesh. You brush at your cheekbones, but the powder clings thick and dry, leaving your lips oddly grey. And yet, to medieval eyes, this is glamour. Historians still argue whether the obsession with pallor began with medieval Europe alone, or if it was borrowed from earlier traditions. Ancient Rome loved a ghostly complexion too, while in Japan, noble women painted their faces white centuries before. But what's certain is that pale meant privilege. If you could stay indoors and let others toil, your skin showed it. Of course, the methods weren't exactly safe. Lead-based powders seeped through pores over time, causing tremors, hair loss, and slow poisoning. That trembling hand at the banquet, it might not be nerves. It might be your beauty powder gnawing at your nervous system. You can almost hear the irony, trying to look lively while the makeup slowly kills you. Here's the quirky bit. Some women went further, drawing blue veins onto their skin with thin brushes and dyes. Yes, painting veins, so pale that your skin seemed translucent like delicate parchment. Imagine spending an afternoon carefully sketching fake blood vessels, only to have someone sneeze and smudge your artistry. Talk about a makeup fail. And then there were sun masks. You picture yourself lounging by a window, wanting light but terrified of a tan. So you hold up a piece of cloth with cut-out eye holes. The mask protects your precious pallor while you peek through like some ghost at the carnival. Later centuries would invent parasols and big floppy hats. But in the medieval moment, it's you, your powder, and the constant fear of colour. Still, not everyone agreed. Farmers' daughters, washing clothes in the river, had skin bronzed by the sun, and in some songs and poems, that sun-kissed look was celebrated as natural beauty. Historians still debate whether pale skin was universally admired or if it depended on region and class. Yet at court you know the answer. One freckle too many, and whispers begin. Here's your light joke for this section. Imagine explaining to a medieval lady that in the 21st century, people pay good money to lie under lamps or fly to beaches just to get tanned. She'd probably faint, then accuse you of witchcraft. You smear more powder on, though the texture cracks when you smile. You dab at your neck, dust your ears, trying to erase any hint of sun. The mirror, well, polished bronze, shows a figure slowly detaching from reality, ghostly pale, almost ethereal. It's beautiful in a haunting way, like something painted onto a cathedral wall. But the price of this look is constant vigilance. Every trip outdoors requires calculation. How long in the sun, what cloth can cover you, how much powder you must reapply. Your daily life becomes a chess match with nature itself. And the strangest part? Even men sometimes joined in, dusting their faces with pale powders before banquets. Vanity was not confined by gender, even if the rules pressed harder on women. So you leave the courtyard, powdered and pale, the chalky taste lingering near your lips, knowing you've crossed into a beauty standard that demands you fight against the sun itself. Remember this moment, because as the night deepens, you'll discover beauty rules that don't just drain colour from your skin. They squeeze, twist, and reshape your very body. The corridor grows narrower as you walk, the air heavy with dust and the creak of timber beams. Ahead lies a chamber lined with carved chests, their lids thrown open to reveal coiled fabric, laces, and stays. This is where beauty no longer hovers on your forehead or your complexion. It tightens around your ribs, reshaping you until even your breathing is dictated by fashion. You step closer, and a maid lifts something that looks part armor, part trap, the corset. Though corsets would evolve more dramatically in later centuries, medieval versions were already here in the form of stiffened bodices and girdles. Some were made of whalebone, others reinforced with wood or horn, and all were pulled taut with cords strong enough to moor a ship. You slide into one, the fabric rough against your chemise, and feel hands tugging at the laces in the back. The pressure builds. At first it's manageable, like hugging yourself too tightly. But then comes the next pull, and another, until the air in your lungs feels rationed. The goal wasn't just to slim your waist, it was to project discipline. A body forced into rigid lines reflected a soul that was supposedly obedient, pure, and controlled. Historians still argue whether medieval corsetry was truly about health and posture, or if it was mostly about making women appear as silent, structured ornaments for the court. Either way, your ribs don't care about the debate, they just want space to expand. Here's the odd detail. Some women believed wearing tight stays could literally move internal organs around, improving digestion or protecting virtue by making the body less inviting. You stand there, half gasping, wondering if your spleen has just shifted into your neighbor's ribcage. And yes, fainting was part of the drama. A swoon at a banquet wasn't always from romance. It was often from lack of oxygen. Picture yourself mid-dance, the music whirling, then thud. Down you go, corset still holding its iron grip. Servants rush in, wafting vinegar-soaked cloth beneath your nose to jolt you awake. And once revived, back to the feast, laces still tied, but corsets weren't universally detested. Some women swore they improved posture, giving them an elegant silhouette that matched the long flowing gowns of the time. Standing straight was a sign of breeding, slouching suggested sloppiness. So you endure the squeeze, shoulders drawn back, chest thrust forward, as though your body itself is a proclamation of nobility. Now, for your quirky tidbit, certain manuals recommended pregnant women wear gentler corsets to support the child. Imagine being told to strap your belly into stiff fabric while carrying extra weight. Comfort clearly wasn't the priority, and the men? Don't think they escaped. In some courts, especially later on, gentlemen wore their own tight doublets laced snugly, shaping torsos into proud, unnatural lines. Vanity doesn't discriminate, it just changes costume. Here's your laugh for this section. Imagine telling a medieval tailor that future people wear stretchy leggings and oversized hoodies as fashion. He'd probably collapse on the spot, corset or no corset, muttering that civilization had finally unraveled. The laces tug one last time, and you stand in the mirror. Your waist looks narrower, your stance rigid, your breath shallow. Beneath the fabric, your body complains, but outwardly you appear serene, composed, worthy of admiration. The corset hasn't just reshaped your form, it's reshaped your role, signaling that your body belongs to society's gaze, not to you. As you leave the chamber, you notice faint marks etched into your skin from the pressure. Red ridges where the stays pressed hardest. They sting, but you ignore them. Pain is part of the costume. And tonight, this won't be the last time beauty demands you trade comfort for control. You shuffle now into a candlelit chamber where polished jars and tiny spoons glimmer on a table. At first glance, it feels like an apothecary's workshop. But then you realize these aren't medicines for the sick. They're paints and powders for the perfectly healthy. Or at least the ones who want to appear that way. You lean closer, the air dry with the smell of chalk, vinegar, and something metallic. This is the realm of face powder, where beauty glows brighter the more poison you smear on. The jar opens with a soft scrape, and inside lies a pale dust, almost pearly. It's lead carbonate, a mineral ground down until it flows like flour. A lady dips her puff, dabs it onto her cheeks, and suddenly her skin gleams white, smooth, and even. You try it too. The powder clings, cool at first, but soon your lips feel parched, your tongue tingling faintly as a bit drifts into your mouth. You swallow, and a bitter aftertaste spreads down your throat. You remind yourself this is fashionable, not fatal, or at least that's what everyone hopes. Historians still argue whether medieval women fully understood the dangers of lead, or if they simply ignored whispers in favor of chasing beauty. But the symptoms were real enough. Trembling hands, headaches, blackened teeth, and eventually, death. Imagine dying not from battle or plague, but from your morning makeup routine. And yet, the effect was intoxicating. Pale powder smoothed over freckles, scars, even pox marks, erasing history from the skin. It was like Photoshop centuries before Photoshop. Just one that eventually dissolved your nervous system. The quirky side of this story? Some recipes added crushed eggshells or powdered alabaster to the mix, claiming the blend would soften the poison's sting. Others suggested mixing the powder with vinegar to make a paste that dried into a crackling mask. Picture peeling that off, tiny flakes drifting like snow, except this snow makes your skin weaker with each storm. You pause, brush in hand, and wonder about men. Did they powder too? Evidence suggests some did, especially in courts where appearance mattered as much as courage. A knight might wear his armor by day and dab powder by night, ensuring his cheeks looked as spotless as his polished breastplate. Historians still debate how widespread this was, but you wouldn't be surprised if vanity crept behind more than a few beards. Here's your light joke. Imagine explaining to a medieval noblewoman that in the future, people deliberately apply bronzer to look darker, then top it off with glitter. She'd stare at you with chalky disbelief, then offer you a spare jar of lead powder, convinced you've lost your mind. The ritual becomes addictive. You rise each morning, reach for the puff, and cover every inch, face, neck, even your chest. You want no reminder of sun or blemish. The mirror shows not your skin, but a painted version of it, porcelain and cold. And once the powder cracks, you reapply, layer after layer, until the lead builds into a mask too heavy for comfort. But here's the haunting truth. Many portraits we admire today, those smooth faces gazing serenely from gilded frames, owe their glow not to divine artistry alone, but to the artist copying what powder had already achieved. Beneath the brushstrokes lies a face that, in real life, was slowly being eaten from within. You rub your cheek, feeling it itch slightly, as though the powder has already begun to seep, and yet you keep going. Because to appear pale is to appear noble. Because to show colour is to risk shame. Because in this medieval court, survival isn't measured only by food or shelter. It's measured by whether you look good while dying. So you close the jar gently, the powder puff leaving white smudges on your fingertips. You cough softly into your sleeve, noticing the faint chalk dust left behind. And as you step from the chamber, your face glowing but your body secretly trembling, you realize that beauty here isn't skin deep. It's bone deep, poisoning you one dab at a time. You step into a quieter corner of the castle, where the air smells faintly of wax and fur. On a wooden table rests a curious little box, its lid carved with vines and angels, but the contents inside are less heavenly. You lean in and discover tiny strips of brown fuzz, neatly trimmed, arranged in rows. They look like odd scraps from some forgotten garment. Then you realize these are eyebrows. Well, not human ones. Mouse fur. Yes. When fashion demanded that brows vanish, people didn't always leave their foreheads completely bare. Sometimes they improvised. If nature gave you too much brow, you plucked it out. If nature left you with none, or if you went a little overboard, you stuck on replacements. And what better source than the soft coat of a rodent running freely in every corner of medieval Europe? You imagine a noble lady eyeing a scurrying mouse, not as a pest, but as an eyebrow supplier. The process went like this. Take the fur, trim it into slim little arches, and then glue it directly above your eyes. The glue wasn't Elmer's, of course. It was often a sticky mixture of tree resin, honey, or fish bladders boiled down to a gelatinous ooze. You press the furry strip against your skin, hold, and wait. A few seconds later, voila, you've got eyebrows again, though they might twitch if the glue hasn't dried. Historians still argue whether this trend was a court-wide craze, or more of a niche oddity, but enough references survive to suggest it happened. After all, medieval beauty was never about convenience. It was about making the body a canvas for whatever bizarre rules the elite decided to impose. The quirky detail: some women powdered the mouse fur to lighten it, blending it with their pale complexions. Others dyed it darker with soot or wine, trying to create contrast. The result might look elegant by torchlight, or ridiculous up close when the fur bristled at odd angles. Imagine blinking and watching your eyebrow lift half a second later. And yes, men noticed. Court gossip included whispers about ladies whose brows slid slightly askew during a hot banquet, leaving them with one eyebrow practically in their hairline. That's when fans and veils came in handy, not only to flutter coyly, but also to hide a rodent-related mishap. Here's your laugh for this section. Imagine telling a medieval beauty that in the future, people will tattoo eyebrows directly onto their skin. She'd probably sigh with relief. Finally, a method without mice. But in all seriousness, the brow, or lack of it, wasn't just cosmetic. A bare, high forehead signaled purity and refinement, but the right arch could frame the eyes, drawing attention to the soul, or at least the flirtation. In manuscripts and paintings, women with barely their brows look distant, almost angelic. Add a strip of fur, though, and the gaze sharpens, becomes more human, more mischievous. That little detail changed how others read your entire face. You stare at yourself in a bronze mirror. The mouse fur strip itches slightly, and you wonder if the creature it came from once darted across this very room. You blink, testing the hold of the glue. It stays for now, but the warmth of the chamber, the sweat of a crowded hall, the steam of mulled wine, any of those could loosen the bond. Beauty, it seems, is always one slip away from embarrassment. Still, you keep the brows on, because tonight you'll pass through halls where every pair of eyes scans, judges, and mocks. Better to risk a furry mishap than face the shame of an empty forehead. You smooth the edges with your finger, take a breath, and walk back into the firelit corridor, knowing you're carrying a secret that squeaks if you think about it too long. The corridor leads you into a smoky hall where platters of roasted meat and bowls of pottage clutter the trestle tables. Amid the smells of garlic, onions, and spilled ale, something else lingers. The faint sting of herbs burned and ground, rubbed not on food, but on teeth. Here, beauty shifts from forehead and skin to your smile. You press your lips together self-consciously, because in medieval courts, a mouth could make or break you. You glance around. Some noblemen laugh wide, showing rows of teeth surprisingly darkened, on purpose. In certain places, especially in Asia, blackened teeth were considered elegant, a mark of maturity and status. In Europe, however, the fashion leaned toward bright and polished, though the methods were anything but gentle. You sit by the hearth and watch a servant grind rosemary into ash, mix it with salt, and hand the gritty paste to a lady. She rubs it against her teeth with a cloth until sparks of pain flash across her gums. You try a dab yourself. The mixture scrapes, harsh and bitter, leaving your tongue tasting like burnt wood. Historians still argue whether medieval Europeans consistently valued white teeth or simply clean-looking ones. Surviving recipes show everything from crushed pearls mixed with vinegar to powders of coral, sage, or even powdered brick. Some physicians warned that harsh scrubs would wear down enamel, though they didn't use the word enamel yet. They just noticed teeth breaking sooner than they should. And then there's urine. Yes, you heard that right. Ammonia in stale urine acted as a bleaching agent, so some ambitious souls rinsed their mouths with it, convinced their smiles gleamed brighter afterward. The quirky tidbit. Records suggest Roman and later medieval societies actually traded jars of urine specifically for cosmetic use. Imagine bargaining at the market. A loaf of bread, some onions, and your finest chamber pot, please. The pressure was real, though. A rotting smile meant whispers of disease, corruption, or low status. Portraits rarely showed teeth, but in private, a healthy grin could charm allies or lovers. Bad breath, on the other hand, could ruin an evening as quickly as a spoiled pheasant. Medieval guides recommended chewing parsley or cloves before important meetings. You pop a sprig of minty herb into your mouth now, hoping it masks the rosemary ash aftertaste. Here's your light joke. Imagine a medieval nobleman at a banquet, leaning over to brag, "My smile cost me 3 pearls and a bucket of pee." Not exactly the pickup line you'd swipe right on. But beneath the laughter lies truth. Teeth told stories. A peasant's teeth, worn from coarse bread full of grit, contrasted with a noble's, polished yet fragile from strange experiments. A merchant's smile, stained from wine, might reveal his trade more clearly than his ledger. And when you smiled, you broadcasted not only joy, but also how much pain and effort you'd invested that morning just to look acceptable. You rub your gums again, sore from the scrubbing, but notice in the bronze mirror that your teeth look a shade brighter. Was it worth the sting? In this world, the answer must always be yes. Beauty is currency, and you just spent some enamel to buy social standing. So you push away the platter of greasy meat, sip carefully from a goblet, and keep your lips curved in a restrained, noble smile. Behind it lurks discomfort, but no one else can see. They only see the glint of light on your teeth, and in this hall, that's enough to make you shine. The hall grows louder with laughter and clinking goblets. But something nags at you, an absence, almost louder than the noise itself. Where is the water? You realize quickly that bathing isn't the nightly ritual, you know. Soap is rare, tubs are heavy, and firewood to heat water is costly. In many places, people worry that hot baths open the pores and invite illness. So if you can't wash the sweat and smoke from your skin, you cover it up with something else. Perfume. A servant passes by with a small vial of amber liquid corked with wax. You take it, twist it open, and a wave of scent escapes. Sharp, spicy, a blend of cinnamon and clove. The air clings to your nostrils like sweet smoke. You dab some on your neck and wrists, and instantly the aroma battles with the odors of roasted goose and unwashed bodies. Perfume here isn't just a luxury. It's armor. The ingredients are exotic. Traders carry musk from animals, ambergris from whales, and rare resins from the east. Ground roses, violets, and herbs mix with alcohol or oil, creating blends that could cost as much as jewels. Wearing these scents declares not just cleanliness, but wealth. Your body becomes a walking advertisement that you can afford to smell good when most people smell, well, medieval. Historians still argue whether perfume was mainly about masking odor or signaling status. Some records suggest nobles genuinely believed perfumes carried health benefits, protecting them from miasma, the foul air thought to spread disease. Others hint that it was mostly fashion, with nobles competing to out-scent each other like rival peacocks. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some perfumes were applied not only to the skin, but also to clothing, wigs, even handkerchiefs. Imagine dabbing a drop on your gloves, then dramatically waving them before your face whenever someone too smelly came near. It's part hygiene, part theatre. You hold the vial close, inhaling again, and wonder how strong the mix will smell in a crowded hall of dancers and singers. Likely, it doesn't just cover odour, it mingles with it, creating a strange stew of musk, sweat, garlic and roses. Not exactly Chanel No. 5. And here's your laugh for this section. Picture yourself explaining deodorant sticks to a medieval perfumer. He'd squint, sniff suspiciously and say, "But where's the whale vomit?" Perfume's role goes deeper though. In romances and poetry, a lady's scent is described as intoxicating, divine, enough to captivate a knight from across the hall. To smell pleasant is to become almost supernatural, a step closer to sainthood or seduction. The irony, of course, is that under all that musk and rosewater, the wearer might not have bathed in weeks. You tuck the vial into your belt, the scent clinging stubbornly to your fingertips. The hall seems a little softer now, less pungent, though you know it's only an illusion. Perfume can't change the fact that bodies sweat, cook, and decay. It just overlays another story on top. And tonight, that story is one of wealth, elegance, and carefully crafted denial. As you drift away from the tables, your nose tingling with clove and ambergris, you realize beauty here isn't always about what's visible. Sometimes it's the invisible cloud you carry, the fragrance that announces your arrival before you speak a word. The laughter of the hall follows you into a smaller chamber, where the air is brighter, sliced by sunlight pouring through narrow glass windows. Here, ladies sit in high-backed chairs, their hair pinned into bundles. You watch curiously as a servant brings a clay jug, steaming faintly, and a scent hits you. Sharp, acrid, impossible to mistake. It's urine. Yes, you heard right. Medieval hair bleaching sometimes relied on ammonia-rich liquids, especially stale human or even animal urine. The logic is painfully clear. Ammonia strips colour. You wrinkle your nose as one young woman dips her comb into the liquid and drags it through her hair. She then tilts her head back, exposing strands to the sunlight streaming through the window. A slow alchemy begins, her dark locks lifting toward shades of gold. Why would anyone endure this? Because fair hair carried power. Golden locks weren't just beautiful. They were symbols of youth, purity, even divine favor. Poets sang of maidens with tresses like spun sunlight. Nobles gazed on portraits where pale hair framed pale faces, the double halo of wealth. To have dark hair was perfectly natural, but to lighten it, even at the cost of discomfort, was to climb a rung higher on the ladder of desirability. And so, women sat in courtyards with their hair soaked and their skin stinging, enduring hours of sunshine and stink. Some recipes even suggested mixing saffron, alum, or vinegar with the urine, a cocktail of burn and brightness. The process could leave hair brittle, fried, and smelling less than divine, but the result, a lighter shade, was worth the sacrifice. You almost laugh imagining the scene as a fashion ritual. Women chatting idly while their heads reek like chamber pots, fanning themselves and giggling about nights, pretending not to notice the odor. And then later, at a feast, those same heads, glowing like halos under candlelight, everyone whispering about their beauty. The danger wasn't just the smell. Some mixtures were corrosive enough to blister skin or weaken roots. Hair might thin, fall out, or break into straw-like tufts. But remember, this was an age where beauty and suffering were practically synonyms. To endure pain for appearance was not folly, but proof of devotion. What strikes you most is the patience. Today's bleach works in minutes. Theirs took days, sometimes weeks of repeated exposure. Imagine the persistence required to keep pouring, combing and waiting, only to see your hair fade a shade lighter over months. It's less a beauty trick and more a long experiment in endurance. And here's your dark chuckle. Historians note that some bleaching was done with horse urine because of its stronger ammonia. So yes, when someone admired a noblewoman's golden hair, they might be unknowingly praising the byproduct of a stable. You step back from the chamber, half amazed, half queasy. The sunlight still glints on those damp locks, promising glory at the cost of comfort. And as you leave, you can't help but think, beauty here isn't just painted or powdered. It seeps into every sense, sight, smell, even patience. In this world, to glow like the sun, you must first endure the sting of the earth's least glamorous gift. You shuffle along a stone corridor and emerge into a hall where shoes, tiny and glittering, line the wall like trophies. At first, they seem like ornaments, too small for any grown person. But then you realize these are not toys. They are footwear designed to pinch, to bind, to reshape the human foot itself. In parts of medieval Europe, especially in courts influenced by Eastern imports, delicate shoes with elongated points or impossibly small sizing became symbols of refinement. You slip one off the shelf, holding it up. It's hardly longer than your hand. Slipping your foot inside feels laughable at first, until the pressure clamps down, bones pressing against leather, toes curled painfully together. The idea, you realize, was to make steps shorter, daintier, more graceful. Walking in these was less about moving swiftly and more about gliding with carefully measured gestures. The obsession with small feet wasn't confined to Europe. Your thoughts drift further eastward, where binding practices in China, though more systematic and extreme, followed the same principle. The smaller the foot, the greater the mark of status. Here too, tiny steps symbolize delicacy and refinement, proof that the wearer did not need to labor in fields or markets. You picture noblewomen tottering in processions, the crowd admiring how their delicate shoes glittered with embroidery and jewels. The pain hidden beneath was almost the point, because discomfort became a quiet badge of luxury. After all, only those with wealth could afford to live hobbled, never needing to run, climb, or work. Historians still argue whether European shoe fashion was directly inspired by Chinese foot binding, or whether the trend developed independently. What is clear is that across cultures, small feet became a peculiar obsession, praised in poetry and immortalized in art. To be lovely was apparently to be barely able to walk. You try a few steps in the borrowed shoes. Your stride becomes comical, a shuffle masquerading as elegance. The floor echoes with uneven taps, and you imagine the stifled laughter of servants who knew too well the ridiculous side of this fashion. Yet you also sense the quiet cruelty of it. How many bones cracked, how many joints twisted permanently out of place, all for the illusion of a floating walk. Here's the quirky twist. Some medieval shoes were so long at the toes that men had to fasten them to their knees with little chains to prevent tripping. Imagine a ballroom filled with nobles mincing around, chained like puppets, each step both graceful and absurd. Beauty, it seems, danced on the edge of parody, and the debate lingers. Were such shoes purely decorative, or did they encode deeper meanings? Status markers, fertility symbols, even subtle jokes. Scholars disagree, and you smile at the thought. Entire conferences might be spent dissecting the symbolism of a shoe too small to wear comfortably. You slide the little slipper back onto the shelf and flex your cramped toes with relief. Pain lingers, reminding you how close beauty and suffering walked hand in hand. You realize that in this age, every step forward in fashion often meant a step backward in comfort. The hall grows quieter as you drift toward a small alcove where candles flicker against polished bronze mirrors. A noblewoman sits before one, her gown heavy with embroidery, while a servant leans in close. Something gleams in the candlelight. At first, you think it's a jewel dangling from her ear, but then you realize, no, the sparkle is beneath her skin. Yes, in certain medieval courts, beauty could mean literally pressing jewels into shallow cuts on the face or arms, so they shimmered faintly in the glow of fire. It wasn't common, but the very rumor of it made imaginations run wild. Picture sapphires set against pale cheeks, pearls pressed into a wrist, or tiny garnets twinkling along a temple like fallen stars. You wince as you watch the servant push the stone against tender flesh, leaving a faint swelling that catches the light. It looks glamorous for a moment until you remember, infection was just a breath away. In an era without antiseptics, any wound was dangerous, and all for a shimmer that might fade within days. Historians still argue whether this practice was widespread or exaggerated by gossip, but accounts suggest at least some nobles toyed with the idea. After all, jewels weren't just decoration. They were talismans, believed to carry protective or mystical powers. A ruby pressed close to the skin might shield the heart. A pearl could guard chastity. A diamond could ward off evil thoughts. To wear them embedded, however briefly, was to merge beauty with superstition. Of course, there were safer variations. Some ladies simply glued jewels onto their skin using resins or gum arabic. It worked well enough for a night of dancing, a brief illusion of sparkle that would peel away by morning. Think of it as the medieval ancestor of today's stick-on rhinestones at music festivals, except with fewer safety standards and more whispered awe. And here's your little absurdity. Some courtiers supposedly pressed gold leaf into their skin, hoping it would melt into their complexion and grant a permanent glow. Imagine waking up flecked like a pastry and still believing you were radiant. The debate continues. Was this truly an art of embedding, or more of an adornment trick exaggerated into legend? Whatever the truth, the idea captures that timeless desire to shine more than others, even if it hurts. You remember the lead face powder, the mouse fur eyebrows. Now it's jewels under the skin, beauty sharpened to a point of pain. As you step back, the noblewoman admires her reflection, her face glowing faintly under the candle's kiss. She looks triumphant, as if the sparkle proves her power. Yet you can't shake the thought. In this hall, beauty isn't just painted or perfumed. It's carved, pressed, etched right into flesh. You pass through a long gallery where the air feels thinner, almost hollow, as if hunger itself lingers in the walls. Nobles glide past you, their cheeks sharp, their frames wiry. At first you assume famine has struck, but then you realize this is deliberate. Slimness itself has become a mark of beauty, and fasting a kind of twisted game. In many medieval circles, a lean figure was praised as spiritual and aesthetic perfection. Rounded bellies and ruddy cheeks might signal prosperity in peasants, but among the elite, restraint was its own luxury. To appear thin meant you had the discipline and servants to refuse abundance. You step beside a lady whose gown hangs loose on her narrow shoulders, her hollowed cheekbones catching the torchlight like sculpture. And it wasn't only vanity. The church's deep influence turned fasting into virtue. Thinness wasn't just attractive, it was holy. The idea that saints glowed with divine beauty because they renounced earthly indulgence seeped into secular ideals. Some women starved themselves not merely to look delicate, but to echo spiritual heroines like Catherine of Siena, whose emaciated body was praised as a sign of sanctity. Historians still argue whether Catherine's extreme fasting was devotion or illness, but the effect it had on beauty ideals cannot be ignored. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some nobles were known to trick others by chewing herbs, spitting them out, or wearing tight belts under gowns to cinch their waists unnaturally small. Others carried oranges or pomanders, nibbling delicately at feasts to appear dainty, while servants later delivered fuller meals in private. Beauty here was performance, half hunger, half illusion. Imagine sitting through a banquet with roasted boar, sugared almonds and spiced wine flowing freely, while you take only a crumb of bread and sip watered-down broth, pretending you're satisfied. The audience is everything. Guests would whisper, "See how restrained she is, how saintly her appetite, how elegant her frame." Meanwhile, your stomach growls loud enough to harmonize with the lute player. Not everyone agreed. Some portraits celebrate plump figures, especially in merchant households where wealth was new and visible abundance mattered. The pendulum of ideals swung wildly depending on region and century. Yet among courts, the fragile bird-like body often won out. The weaker you looked, the more powerful your family must be, because clearly you weren't out ploughing fields. You imagine trying it yourself, fasting in flickering candlelight, your body growing lightheaded, your steps unsteady. By the third day, beauty feels less like radiance and more like survival theatre. Still, those who pulled it off glowed in tapestries and poems, immortalized as delicate blossoms too fine for the earth. The irony is delicious. Beauty born of starvation in rooms where food overflowed, plates piled high, yet mouths shut tight, all so that gaunt cheeks could whisper the same thing pale skin once did. That comfort and power allowed you to suffer, elegantly, on purpose. The smell hits you before the sight does. Powdered flour, musty fabric, a faint whiff of something alive. You step into a chamber where wigs tower like sculptures, stacked higher than your head. Servants scurry around with combs, pins, and bags of powder, as if tending to elaborate monuments rather than hairpieces. Wigs in the late medieval and early Renaissance courts weren't just practical. They were theatres of status, height, and drama. Some rose so high they threatened the stability of their wearers, curling into elaborate waves dusted with flour or starch. A noblewoman sits before you now, her own hair tightly bound, while a massive wig is lowered onto her head with the care of setting a crown. It looks majestic, until the powdering begins. White flour clouds the room, coating hair, gowns, even your sleeves. The wig becomes a frosted mountain, gleaming under candlelight. But with flour comes trouble, the tiny creatures it attracts. Lice, fleas, and sometimes mice found these wigs irresistible. Imagine leaning in to whisper at a banquet only to hear faint scratching above your ear. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some wigs were so infested that servants set out little wig traps at night, basically cheese or cloth scraps left nearby so vermin would move out temporarily. The idea of waking up to find your coiffure rustling with stowaways is equal parts horrifying and absurd. Yet the absurdity didn't stop anyone. The bigger the wig, the more wealth it displayed. The powder wasn't just for colour, it masked grease, odour, and the fact that washing was rare. A wig powdered daily was a wig reborn, even if it harboured its own ecosystem. Historians still argue whether every noble truly tolerated infestations, or whether satirists exaggerated the horror. Caricatures from the era certainly loved mocking wig wearers as walking nests, but even exaggeration has roots in truth, and you find yourself scratching your scalp in sympathy. And yet the glamour was real. By candlelight, these powdered towers sparkled like snowdrifts, adorned with ribbons, feathers, even tiny ships or bird cages in later centuries. You picture a noble sweeping into the hall, her wig brushing door frames, her head swaying slightly under the weight, every inch of her saying, "Look how much I can carry, just for beauty." You shift your gaze to the men's wigs, smaller, curled, but equally powdered. Here the joke sharpens. Even warriors who fought in muddy fields donned wigs so crisp and perfumed that one sneeze might turn them into white clouds. Vanity was universal, and wigs became the battlefield where dignity and absurdity tangled. As you back away, you can almost hear the scratching under those powdered layers, the soft rustle of living things claiming residence. Beauty here isn't just heavy, it crawls, it itches, it breathes alongside you. You drift into a smaller chamber where glass vials line the shelves, glowing faintly in the torchlight. The air here is sharp with herbs, metallic with dust, faintly sweet, faintly sour. A table is cluttered with powders. gold flecks, crushed pearls, dried flowers, even something that looks suspiciously like quicksilver swirling in a shallow dish. Welcome to the world of beauty elixirs, where youth is promised in every sip, but the recipes are more curse than cure. Noble women, and noblemen, too, chased after potions said to preserve freshness of skin, brightness of eyes and smoothness of complexion. Some recipes were harmless enough. Rosewater, honey, or distilled herbs mixed into drinks or applied to the skin. But many went darker. Mercury, for instance, slipped into concoctions with the claim it could keep the body supple. Gold dust was stirred into wine, believed to infuse radiance from within. And arsenic, yes, arsenic, was sometimes touted as a beautifying agent, supposedly lending skin an ethereal glow. You picture a lady sipping delicately from a silver cup, convinced that the metallic tang on her tongue is the taste of eternal youth. She smiles at her reflection, not realizing that each drop is poisoning her veins. The quirky tidbit here, some recipes called for grinding up precious gemstones. Diamonds, sapphires, and emeralds were pulverized into powders and swallowed. Did it work? Absolutely not, except to give very expensive grit in your stomach. But the symbolism mattered. To consume gems was to embody their virtues. Rubies promise passion, pearls purity, emeralds fertility. It's half science, half sorcery, and all stomachache. Historians still argue whether these elixirs were taken in earnest or more as symbolic rituals, a sip of gold-laced water to signal wealth, rather than a true daily practice. Some scholars suggest that most nobles only dabbled in these exotic recipes on special occasions, more for spectacle than routine. Others claim that at least a few died younger thanks to enthusiastic daily beauty tonics. You lean closer to the table, tempted to touch the glowing powders. The colors mesmerize, green malachite ground into soft dust, bright vermilion paste shimmering like fire. But then you imagine what they do inside a human body. The slow burn, the metallic bite, the creeping damage. And yet, the allure was undeniable. To sip an elixir felt like magic, like stepping outside the rules of nature. You can almost hear the whispers in court. She looks 20 years younger. Must be the pearl draft. In a world where mirrors were cloudy and portraits flattering, belief was half the battle. You smile at the irony. Modern influencers hawk collagen shots and vitamin serums with glossy ads. The medieval equivalent, a goblet of wine spiked with mercury and optimism. Different ingredients, same desperation. You step away from the shelves, the glow of those dangerous vials still tugging at your thoughts. Beauty here isn't skin deep. It seeps down into the bloodstream, a gamble between radiance and ruin. You leave the chamber of glittering vials and step into a courtyard filled with laughter. But it's not the kind that warms the soul. It's sharp, mocking, a chorus of voices turned cruel. At the center stands a woman, her dress plain, her face unpainted, her hair unstyled. She doesn't meet anyone's eyes. This is the darker side of medieval beauty, the public shaming of those who failed to match impossible ideals. In an age where appearance carried moral weight, ugliness was not merely seen as unfortunate, it was judged as a flaw of character. A pockmarked face could be blamed on sin, a crooked nose on bad blood. People whispered that God revealed the soul through the body. So to look unattractive was, in their minds, to be unworthy. Imagine carrying that burden on your skin every day. You glance at the mocking crowd and notice a man in the livery of a jester, exaggerating her features with gestures, crossing his eyes and puffing his cheeks to the audience's delight. Even court entertainment fed on ridicule. Here's your quirky tidbit. In some towns, festivals even included parades of the ugly, where unlucky individuals were crowned mock royalty, dressed up and jeered at for the crowd's amusement. It sounds absurd, but cruelty often hides under the mask of festivity. Historians still argue whether such rituals were playful, exaggerations, like carnivals where the world turned, upside down, or genuine punishment for those who strayed from beauty standards. Either way, the result was the same, shame woven into spectacle. What strikes you most is how inescapable it feels. To be born with scars, to age naturally, or simply to lack the fashionable look of the hour could make you a target. No expensive wig? You're mocked. No powdered face? You're pitied. No delicate figure? You're scorned. The court and the village alike could wield beauty standards as weapons sharper than any blade. And here's the cruel joke of it all. Sometimes the very features mocked in one century became prized in another. A plump figure ridiculed in a fasting court might later be celebrated in art as luscious and desirable. The wheel spun, but those caught beneath it had no way of knowing they'd someday be in style. You watch the woman in the courtyard bow her head as laughter rains down, her hands clutched tight at her sides. The mockery seems endless, yet behind her eyes you catch something else. Not just shame, but defiance. Perhaps she knows that beauty is a shifting game, that today's jeers may one day dissolve into tomorrow's praise. As you turn away, the laughter fades, but it leaves an echo. Beauty here isn't just paint, powder, or jewels. It's judgment, wielded cruelly by the crowd, enforced in public spaces, carved into memory like scars. The courtyard fades, and you find yourself in a chamber quieter than any you've entered before. Candles flicker softly, illuminating a single object resting on a carved wooden table. A mirror, its surface dim, clouded, imperfect. You step closer, and your reflection stares back, warped slightly by the glass, but recognizable. Only here, the mirror is more than a tool. It's a moral judge. In the medieval imagination, mirrors weren't just about vanity. They were portals of truth, showing not only how you looked, but who you were. A flawless face meant virtue. A blemished one might be whispered about as a mark of inner corruption. People believed that the mirror revealed the state of the soul, that beauty and goodness reflected each other like light on water. You lean closer and see a noblewoman do the same. She tilts her head, examining the pale powder on her cheeks, the delicate arch of her drawn brows. But her gaze is searching for more than cosmetics. She wants reassurance that she is righteous, worthy, beloved in the eyes of both society and God. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some mirrors were engraved with moral mottos, phrases like, remember, death or see thy sins, imagine, putting on your mouse fur eyebrows only to be reminded in tiny, lettering that your beauty is fleeting, and your soul might need polishing more than your face. Talk about a medieval pep talk. Historians still argue whether mirrors were mostly luxuries for the rich, or whether humbler households also used polished metal surfaces as reflective guides. Either way, the symbolism remained strong. What you saw was never just skin. It was a reflection of cosmic order, moral standing, and social worth. You trail your hand along the edge of the mirror. The glass feels cool, grounding, and you can't help but laugh softly at the irony. After lead powders, jewel implants, and sun-bleached urine hair, the ultimate judge of beauty is still this quiet rectangle of polished glass. No amount of powder can stop time's hand from creeping across your reflection. The noblewoman sighs and steps away. You linger, watching your own face ripple faintly in the uneven glass, your features softening, fading with the flicker of the candles. And as the light dims, the mirror seems less like a judge and more like a whisper. That beauty was always fragile, always temporary, and always bound to slip into memory. And now, as the last reflection fades, the noise of the medieval world ebbs away. The wigs, the powders, the corsets, the laughter, all of it grows softer, like echoes sliding down a long corridor until they dissolve into silence. You sit in the hush, the mirror still before you, but its surface no longer demands anything. It simply rests, waiting, calm. Let your breathing slow here. Imagine the candlelight flickering gently across stone walls, a warmth that doesn't burn but cradles. The air no longer smells of urine or flour, nor tastes of powdered pearl. It's clean, cool, neutral, the kind of air that asks nothing of you. You don't need to squeeze into shoes, or hold your stomach through another fast, or press gems into your skin. You only need to sit and let the stillness wrap itself around you. The medieval world loved its harsh rules, its brutal standards of beauty, but none of that follows you now. In this quiet moment, there are no crowds to judge, no mirrors to measure you, no powders to sting. There is only you, unhurried, unbound, drifting gently away from the weight of history. As the last candle in the chamber flickers low, the mirror becomes just glass, nothing more. It reflects nothing, demands nothing, and you are free. Free to close your eyes, free to let the centuries fold back into shadow, free to rest, so let go now. Let the soft hum of the present, your room, your fan, the steady rhythm of night, take over. Let your body sink heavier, your mind loosen its grip, and your thoughts scatter like dust motes in candlelight. Sleep waits just ahead, gentle and forgiving. Step into it and rest well.